First dangerous precedent from the war is a seeming vindication of the use of force for a diplomatic conflict. Force, might makes right, is a very dangerous precedent that is still unchallenged. The second dangerous precedent from the war in 2020 was a seeming victory of larger authoritarian countries over the struggling democracies of Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh. Both of these dangerous precedents only tend to undermine European values and the Western commitment to diplomacy above all else. In this context, this post-war reality is far from a post-conflict situation. There are three imperatives. The first imperative is the human cost of the war that remains lingering. That is the incomplete return of all prisoners of war and detainees. In other words, one imperative is the necessity to return all prisoners of war and detainees from Azerbaijani captivity. Only then can Armenia begin to move beyond the war. The second imperative is a de-escalation along the border between Armenia and Azerbaijan. This is especially imperative for the necessity to construct a legal institutional framework for border delineation and demarcation. And the third imperative is a renewed commitment to diplomatic negotiations in order to transform a Russian-imposed ceasefire into a more lasting, durable peace process, envisioning both status and security. But in conclusion, it's most important to note there is no conclusion. This is very much a dynamic, not static process. And Armenia, if nothing else, is a nation of survivors. And despite the unprecedented loss in the war, Armenia has demonstrated an impressive degree of resilience based on a second back-to-back free and fair election, giving Armenia a rare commodity of legitimacy. This is the foundation for stability and, moving forward, why the positive outlook of the restoration of trade and transport and transforming a military defeat into a diplomatic victory of all of our neighbors is quite possible. But finally, before turning to my friend and colleague Zaur Shiriev, joining us by video from Baku, I think this is an opportunity with our Azerbaijani colleagues to dominate lately. But finally, as we look at Georgia since 2008, as we look at Ukraine today, this is very much a region at risk, only reaffirming and validating the need for diplomatic engagement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the Minsk Group process of the OSCE, and the normalization between Armenia and Turkey as a rare positive game changer in this region. Thank you for your attention.
Wir bedanken uns für die Ausführung. Vielen herzlichen Dank. Dann
Thank
erteile
you
ich
very
nun
much
das
for your
Wort Herrn
contribution. And I'd now like to give the floor to Mr. Zaur Shiriev, who is an analyst for the International Crisis Group based in Baku. You have the floor, sir.
The distinguished members of the Euronest Parliament Assembly and also the other guests. And I would like, in this limited time, I would like to give an assessment of the Azerbaijani position or Azerbaijani perspective about the post-war situation and expectation from the neighbors and also from the international community. So it is very delicate situation, especially after the war. So after 1.5 years, we see some improvements and on the diplomatic negotiation between Azerbaijan and Armenia under the auspices of Russia, but at the same time many post-wars issues. The first one is that demarcation of the new borders between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which the regions Azerbaijan reclaimed by 2020 war, and this is going to be important to and other measures also to stabilize the situation on the ground. So the leaders of two countries agreed on the demarcation work, but still the principles and also when and how it's going to happen is a question. And so the time frame of and setting of the time frame of this the demarcation work will be very useful, and it's going to be it will help the escalation of the situation on the international border areas. And the second issue is related to the return of the population. So the more than 700,000 Azerbaijanis forced to flee during the first war. So and after the war, there are opportunities for them to return. But in order to them return, the security of the regions are important. So that's why the second important issue for Azerbaijan is the landmines and unexploded ordnance that affects the communities and individuals long after conflict. And also profound effect on the opportunities for post-conflict peace building. So this poses as a long-term social, economic, and environmental threat that denies the use of fertile lands and access to water and affects flows of people, goods, and service. So we saw the especially European Union activity on this and highly appreciated European Union member states activity in the addressing the humanitarian issues, including the landmines. But we haven't seen a genuine and a much more bigger efforts of doing a kind of the donor conference in order to handling of this issue. So also it should be noted that this landmines issue is also not only an Azerbaijan issue, it is also the poses threat of the local communities living in the border of Azerbaijan and Armenia. So this kind of the work, the mining work should be done also to help the Armenians in the international border areas. So the other issue is mostly about the transport corridors and connectivity. The connectivity it will take many years. I mean, a rebuilding process because there's nothing left since the first war. So there is no existing Soviet time infrastructure available in this area. So that's why for both governments, for both Azerbaijan and Armenia, needs international support, both technical and financial support. And in order to move forward, and the first requirements might be and must be is the international assessment of the capacity and also the needs of doing this the transport corridors that connecting Azerbaijan mainland with the next one, the region of Azerbaijan. And this the connectivity also will help in the longer future. Is also it could be also the energy corridor. It could be also become a gas corridor that could benefit from neighboring countries, including Armenia. So coming to with this limited time, I would like also touch upon some of the post-war issues, especially is coming from the 9 November Agreement 2020. So there are different interpretations by the sides about the articles of this agreement. So not all of the issues actually described in this agreement. So that's why the sides, one of the idea coming from Baku, at least the perception in Baku that the sides of Azerbaijan and Armenia should move forward and to start working on the basis for the future peace deal. So this could include all issues that is not written and also spelled out in this the article. So I will conclude my speech in two important points, I believe. The one important issue is that it's not only between Azerbaijan and Armenia an issue anymore, it's the regional issue. And there is one of the important game changer on this issue is that the Turkish-Armenian normalization process. So because of any movement, any positive movement between Turkey and Armenia could open a much more conducive environment for peace talks and discussion between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And we could see much more positive effect of this to entire region and entire society. So that's why we haven't seen yet the genuine international support to Turkish-Armenian normalization process. So that's why this could be also one of the issues that should be taken into account. And second issue is, as Richard Gregosyan said about the Minsk group, but there are no such opportunity, or Baku doesn't see the Minsk group as a relevant forum any future the political discussion or talks with Armenia. So that's why also might be need to renovation of the Minsk group, not as the mandate, but also to how they are going to work and the new agenda. This is how it's seen in Baku that the Minsk group should come with new ideas and how to move forward. And the last point is that there is a need of much more confidence building measures that so far the European Union is much more active in this sphere, especially in the peace building activities, but there is a need more to move forward also to support not only the traditional the peace building tools, also there is a need much more focus to the media and engagement, because the only game changer between the societies, which is the lived in the 30 years, more than 30 years in the state of the enmity, and the only change could happen with the help of the media. So that's why the European Union and other international actors support will be important. And I will conclude my speech with saying that unfortunately after the 2020 war, some countries or some people see this region as a part of the sphere of influence of Russia, and or sometimes it became an excuse for not doing anything in this region. So that's why this mentality, this narrative should change, which the changing of this narrative could help all three nations of this, the South Caucasus, and it could help them to move forward with a new and peaceful agenda. So as a conclusion, I think there are many opportunities. I hope that we will never say after a few years that okay, we missed these opportunities, and we can work together to realize these opportunities. Thank you, all listeners and also the chairman.
Ja, vielen Dank, Herr Scharayev. Dann werde ich jetzt allen Abgeordneten und Gästen gerne das Wort erteilen, die sich an der Debatte teilnehmen möchten. Und ich
give the floor to members who'd like to participate in the debate. You can now take the floor and ask questions to the experts directly as well, if you like.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I would like to first of all thank the colleagues that have conceived and supported the inclusion of this agenda item. I find it very important that we're discussing this topic. I also would like to thank the experts for their input. I want to talk about Armenia's intentions and to make our agenda very clear. Following the devastating 44-day war in 2020, as rightly noted also by Richard, Armenia chose the path of new snap elections and a democratic process to resolve our political internal crisis, and also to understand what sort of a mandate do the people of Armenia vest us with to continue our path. And the voice of the Armenian people has been very clear. It is rule of law internally and an era of peace externally. What is this supposed to mean? We need to separate issues and to try to solve those that are possible to solve on the short term and try to address them in the different formats that they are to be addressed. So the first agenda item that Armenia has is the deblocking of all communications in the South Caucasus. This is not only an economic issue, but also a security issue. We believe that the interdependence will create an incentive for the non-resumption of violence in the South Caucasus. The second agenda item is the demarcation and delimitation of the Armenia-Azerbaijan border. We believe that the forces, armed forces of Armenia and Azerbaijan should be removed in a mirror image from the border, and the process, office work of demarcation and delimitation should commence immediately. Third and foremost, the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is still not resolved, but when we reiterate that the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict is not resolved, we do not intend to solicit international support to perpetuate this conflict. We want to solicit international support to resolve this conflict, to reach a state of sustainable, permanent peace in the South Caucasus. There are humanitarian issues that remain to be resolved. There are still prisoners of war in Baku, and we want them to come home. Armenia has returned all prisoners of war immediately following the 44-day war in 2020, and we have also returned all landmine maps to Azerbaijan. So we also hope that our citizens will come home as soon as possible. Another humanitarian issue is the cultural heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh. We believe that humanitarian organizations should have undeniable, easy access to the region to be able to monitor the cultural heritage everywhere where it's found. And finally, as also mentioned by our experts, the Armenia-Turkey normalization process, as separate as we see this process from the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, it is undeniable that there are interconnections here. We also are in favor of this process, and we want to see results, which means the opening of the border between Armenia and Turkey, and I would like to remind you that it has been Turkey that has closed the border, and the establishment of diplomatic relations. Thank you.
Vielen Dank für Ihren Beitrag.
Thank you very much. Anyone else would like to take the floor? Please go ahead.
Very much. Dear colleagues, distinguished guests, I'm glad to welcome you all to Armenia as a representative of one of the most ancient civilizations that seriously impacted the development of the West and the East. We have always treated our dear guests with great warmth and joy. Those who came to us with the good intentions received the same attitude. And those who come to Armenia with a bad attitude, intentions are now described as a disappeared peoples and countries in history textbooks. Today, like a significant part of humanity, our people are in a zone of ever-increasing turbulence. The world is more dangerous. The red line ceased to function. The traditional political responsibility is replaced by a wide-ranging and highly contagious populism. For a long time, I was heading the Center for European Studies at Yerevan State University, and I have a pretty good idea of what Europe and European values are. However, I am surprised and puzzled to see today's processes. Europe that I knew would not allow such a blatant double standards. I do not recognize Europe and cannot follow the values that I was advocating and struggling for in Armenia for decades. Azerbaijan and Turkey, which committed numerous crimes against humanity with the involvement of terrorist groups from the Middle East against Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia, came out unpunished. No European sanctions were adopted against them. Yes, Today, Armenia is in a complicated situation. It is infected with the same disease, populism. But this does not mean that it will always be so. My direct message to our so-called colleagues from Azerbaijan is very simple. Do not equate the Armenian nation and Armenian state with a group of populists who randomly govern the country during this period. Do not forget about the war's outcome, when the nation was headed by not by populists, but by real leaders. Do not forget that even with the quantitative advantage and the support of Turkey and Pakistan, on your side, the young Armenian soldiers held the defense of their land for 44 days. And finally, give Mr. Aliyev and his bosses a message on behalf of the Armenian statesperson. Nagorno-Karabakh was, still is, and in future will remain Armenian. And this will be the holy duty of every and each Armenian living in the world. Thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Thank you. You have the floor now.
Distinguished Excellencies, dear guests. On September 27, 2020, Azeri-Turkish tandem and jihadist mercenaries attacked peaceful villages and towns in Artsakh Republic, Nagorno-Karabakh. This act of aggression drastically changed the security situation in South Caucasus. Despite the principle of refraining from the threat or use of force embedded in CSC Helsinki Final Act of 1975, which ultimately became one of the three underlying principles to guide the fair solution of Nagorno-Karabakh issue. Despite numerous statements by the leaders of Minsk Group co-chair countries to respect the mentioned principles, despite the call of the UN Secretary General Mr. Guterres for global ceasefire during the COVID pandemic, Azerbaijan and its allies waged war against Republic of Artsakh. The death toll counts for thousands of men and women, elderly and children. Tens of thousands of people were forced to flee from their homes in their historical homeland. An undisclosed number of servicemen and civilians became prisoners of war. Some of them were tortured to death. Some of them are still kept in captivity, despite calls from the international community to let them free. Some of them were sentenced to long-term prison terms. Azerbaijan not only attacked the Republic of Artsakh, but also invaded into the sovereign territory of the Republic of Armenia. Azeri troops are still in Armenia, and in this situation, they are talking about peace and friendship. While talking about opening roads and communication lines in the region, the first thing Azerbaijan did was blocking the road from Vardenis, Armenia, to Martakert, Nagorno-Karabakh. Few weeks later on, they illegally blocked the road between two Armenian towns in Syunik region, Goris and Kapan. This effectively closed the main highway between Armenia and Iran, thus closing the communication lines that are vital for Armenia's survival. But the cynicism of Azerbaijan has hit new heights when President Aliyev started openly boasting that there is no Nagorno-Karabakh issue anymore. They've solved it by force. Azerbaijan blocks the OSCE Minsk Group co-chair's visit to the region. And because of geopolitical interests, the international community tolerates this shameful behavior. If one aggressor country remains unpunished, others may be inspired to follow jungle and not international law. This will lead the world into chaos and anarchy. And the last but not the least, if anyone in Baku or any other thinks that Nagorno-Karabakh case is closed, he or she is wrong. Only fair solution of Artsakh issue will guarantee sustainable peace in this region. And the fairness requires full respect of the right of Artsakh people to be masters of their own destiny. The Republic of Artsakh will be free. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Gut, vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. And now I'll give you the floor.
Dear colleagues, security challenges in our region continue to be acute, while Azerbaijan thinks that conflicts can be resolved by war. Nearly 2 years ago, Azerbaijan decided they could put an end to Nagorno-Karabakh conflict by using force, which in itself is a direct violation of fundamental principle enshrined in the UN Charter and Helsinki Final Act. The war proved to be disastrous, but didn't solve the conflict. The conflict is still there. The outbreak of hostility and anti-Armenianism and the conflict spread clouded the prospects of peace agreement in the region even after the infamous November 9th trilateral announcement. And now it's indeed hard to speak about political dialogue with Azerbaijan. How can we? When until today, Armenian prisoners of war and civilians are kept in Azerbaijan and are exposed to inhumane treatment daily. When Azerbaijan shows off with documentations of violence and bloodshed over Armenian soldiers and destruction of Armenian cultural heritage in Nagorno-Karabakh. How can we talk about security if on a daily basis threats of use of force, cynicism, belligerent rhetorics, propaganda of xenophobia continue to be heard from Azerbaijan? Even more, right now, while we're holding our session, Azerbaijani militaries continue their occupation of the sovereign Armenian territories in Sunik, region I come from. Given the aggressive policy led by Azerbaijan, it becomes difficult to think about security environment in our region. But dear colleagues, the deep silence and indifference of Europe makes it even more challenging. And here we have to be unflinchingly honest when we're talking about our shared values or about our red lines concerning security issues. If the war in Nagorno-Karabakh unleashed by Azerbaijan and fully supported by Turkey was not a red line to put sanctions against the war criminal Aliyev and his regime, if detaining and torturing our prisoners of war is not a red line, then I have to ask you, do we stand for political dialogue or aggression? Do we support political dialogue or policy of coercion? If we do choose political dialogue and security and not aggression, terrorism and xenophobia, then EU has to make unequivocal, targeted political assessments for Azerbaijan and Turkey. Double standards, selective approaches, and hypocrisy should be rejected if, of course, we honestly want to reach security in our region. Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you. Ms. Ramados now has the floor.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, well, creativity is always welcomed. And you know, Azerbaijan has its own brand of creativity. The brand of problem solution by Azerbaijan is neglecting its existence. According to Azerbaijan, there is no Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. There are no prisoners of war. There was no usage of restricted weaponry during the war back then in 2020. There was no destruction of the cultural heritage, and it's not continued right now. There were no terrorists in Artsakh region. No armed forces were and are at the moment on the sovereign territory of Republic of Armenia. It is a very interesting brand of problem solving, neglecting the problem. Well, I want to say to Azerbaijani delegation, there are no ostriches in South Caucasus. And a policy of acting as an ostrich, not seeing the problem, neglecting it, has no future. The right of self-determination of Artsakh people is inevitable. And in the conclusion of my speech, I would like to cite the former president of the Republic of Armenia, who is prosecuted by Azerbaijani dictators and by the populists in our homeland, in Armenia. Artsakh will never be part of Azerbaijan.
Vielen Dank. Dann erteile ich jetzt das Wort Frau
Thank you, Ms. Magdaga, who is with us via the internet now has the floor. I can't see where you're joining us from. I'm afraid we can't read it on the screen. Ms. Maraga has the floor.
Mamadov hat sich gemeldet.
Ms. Mamadov has asked for the floor, and she has the floor.
Dear Chair, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me to express my big thanks to the organizers of this meeting, to our Armenian colleagues, for the very warm welcome, and at the same time to express our really pride to be part of this team to participate in this meeting. And I would like to thank Mr. Helmut for putting the very strong ground for the discussion around the security issues in the South Caucasus, which unfortunately turned to be a little bit to the other negotiations. But I would like once more to underline, to stress importance of the role of the Eastern Partnership in the bringing the peace to the region and bringing the close discussion between Armenia and Azerbaijan to achieve the peace, where all the regional countries will benefit, of course. At the same time, of course, our colleagues from Armenia raised a number of the issues, most of which they already reflected, they already underlined the position of Azerbaijan, which is quite completely in line with the international law and humanitarian law. What was done, how the conflict in the past was solved, was implemented in line with the international law, in line with the international recognized borders of Azerbaijan. And I would like just to reiterate that we are happy to once more to indicate that the conflict is over and we are now bringing the new realities, new political geographic realities to the region, which is very much supported by the Europe. I'm happy that all international organizations are not silent and they are really reflecting on the importance of bringing the partnership and cooperation to the region, and we are happy to use every platform, international platform, for bringing peace to the region. Of course, I would like very much to call my colleagues from Armenia, which unfortunately express not very ethic words to the address of our government, which we have never done before. Our visit, two parliamentary members visit to Armenia, as Mr. Helmut mentioned, is really a very good sign for the bringing the warm relations between two countries. And there were a number of the accusations about the detainees, about this cultural heritage issues, about cultural heritage in the liberated areas. I would like to underline that all the detainees, all the prisoners of war were returned back to Armenia right after the war. Those who are now in the process of the discussion to return to Armenia are those who were captured after the war. This is quite in line with all international rules, international guidelines. And we are not going to bring the message of the 4,000 Azeris about fate of which there is no information, who were captured, who were killed during the First Karabakh War. So this was raised during the last meeting of head of the governments and with the EU and France, President of France. I just would like to underline a few paragraphs which I think will be quite clear message, quite clear answer to very strong messages which we heard from our colleagues from Armenia. Azerbaijan is multinational, multi-confessional country, where dozens of ethnic, religious, linguistic groups have been living side by side for the centuries without any discrimination and intolerance. This proud history of Azerbaijan provides the best guarantee for reintegration of persons belonging to Armenian ethnic minority as equal citizens of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is for the unfreezing all the relations, all the communication between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which will bring peace and security, not only for our region, which will bring very strong benefits for the economic development of the region, at the same time building the bridge between north and west, east and south. And we all know that 21st century presented new challenges in front of all nations and countries. We are all witness how our world is sensitive and vulnerable to change related to how we treat the environment we live in, how we work and we live together, how we cooperate. We are all in greatest need of mutual respect and cooperation between countries and nations. We all want to see our region, South Caucasus, strong and an example of friendship and development. Today, the regional projects that we are proposing to the world serve the security and the development of the region. We offer projects that, on the top of economic importance, have humanitarian and cultural values. As the conflict is over, Azerbaijan has already announced its readiness to embark upon the border delimitation and demarcation between Azerbaijan and Armenia. I am very much happy and welcome the number of the positive messages we heard from our Armenian colleagues that Armenia is ready to be in line with the diplomatic discussions to start with the delimitation and demarcation of the borders. And of course, we also highly appreciate the role OSCE Minsk Group, which should serve changing the agenda to bring the peace to the region, to bring nations together, and to start talking about the peace agreement between two countries. But I would like just again to underline that we are happy that the conflict is over. We are happy that there is negotiations going on for the unfreezing the communication between countries, which will bring peace and prosperity to the region. And we are sure that Azerbaijan, demonstrating this strong position over the years, will bring at the end this peace agreement to be agreed and signed between countries. I would like just to underline a few issues that a number of the concerns which were raised by my Armenian colleagues, we have lived over the years. Over the 30 years, we were raising these issues like the problems with the cultural heritage. We were calling on the international communities to monitor and to make the assessment. And now we are back open, and Azerbaijan is very committed, regardless of the origin of any cultural and religious monument, which will be preserved, which will be restored, and which will be put into operation. And Azerbaijan proved to the whole international community as a reliable country, reliable partner, which respects multiculturalism and peace and agreement. So I would like once more to thank all my colleagues, and I'm happy that my colleague will also add something to what I told. Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much indeed. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. First of all, it's a great pleasure to see all of you in person after such a long time, especially in this very tough time due to pandemic. And I'm grateful to our Armenian host to their welcome. And we are the first time in Yerevan. And I think that shows that the goodwill message of Azerbaijan's side to all of the Armenian peoples. That means that in the future, we want to live with them and with you in peaceful coexistence and to develop, to meet all of the challenges, actually. So I think that today's topic of the debate, it was global security, geopolitical security in South Caucasus, but unfortunately, we listen at not global security, but global threats from Armenian sides. But we think about it that it's the past. We don't want to rise what is happening in the past. But only we think that the Karabakh conflict was over not because of that. There are not actually the military operations. It was over because of we don't want in the future any conflicts. This conflict left a huge big pains in the regions. I'm personally from Karabakh. I visited my home last year. And if you go to see what's happening with my home, and you will understand what does it mean conflict. What does it mean there? There is a huge ruins there. If you go to the Agdam, you will see the Hiroshima of the Caucasus there. If you go with my home, you will see what your soldiers did with my home there. But that's why we don't want to go to the past, actually. We think about it that during the First and the Second War, both Armenian and Azerbaijan peoples, they lost thousands of peoples. Only during First War of the Karabakh, we lost 20,000 peoples there. The 4,000 of them, they are missing if now. I know some of the people from Armenian side also is missing there also. But this is the past, and we think about it that we have to over the conflicts. We don't like and we don't want to see any revanchist or some threats from any peoples there. Azerbaijan state is very powerful. We are ready to reply to any revanchist powers in the future also. But this is not the future. This is the past. But what we want in the future, actually, I want to speak a little about the future. Now there is a good process is going on between Armenia and Azerbaijan, and we think about it that after reaching the peace agreement with both the countries, we will have the good chances to develop these regions. The region has a very nice opportunities to integrate with European Union, European countries, to deal with Asia, with China especially, to have a good relation with Russia also. So we think that we have to use this opportunity because South Caucasus was every time actually very essential and very important regions in the region. All the roads from Asia to Europe crosses South Caucasus, from Russia to Iran, also the same. So have a very human capital, especially Georgians, Azerbaijan, Armenian peoples, they are very clever. And we think about that to use these resources, we can serve the people. If we want to serve the people, we are the member of parliaments, we have to will and we have to do good future for our nations. So one of these opportunities is 3+3 format. This is the new format. It was announced by Azerbaijan president. The first meeting was in Moscow. The second meeting will be next week in Tehran. What about the 3+3? So it means that 3 countries is the Azerbaijan, Armenia, and Georgia. These are the internal countries. And external players is the Turkey, Russia, and Iran. So we think about is that to use this new format, we can achieve sustainable peace and economic development in the future also. So we think about is that if you think about the global security, we have to think about the 3 circles. The first circle is that we have to achieve actually the health system security in the both inside of the country. The second circle is that we have to good relation with the region neighbors. So what's the main basic of the good relation with neighbors? We have to respect to each other territorial integrity. We have to respect to each other's choice, and we have to respect to each other people. This is very essential. And the third circle is that each of the South Caucasus countries have a different geopolitical choices. Armenia is the part of the one military organization. Azerbaijan is the head of the non-alignment movement, but we have an alliance agreement with Turkey. Georgia is more integrating, or I don't know, they are not in any of the military groups, but in the future maybe they will have another choice. But if you see that both 3 countries, we have the very different geopolitical choices. The main essential problem is that how we'll combine it in the future. If we want that the peace will be in our home or development will be in the South Caucasus, we have to find common interests and common actual global security challenges. That's why what's the better way for that ones? We have to achieve security in South Caucasus inside of us. So we are ready actually Azerbaijan. In today's Azerbaijan agenda is only peace, development, restoration, and economic development all of the country. We have very good relations with the European Union. You know, Azerbaijan is the only country of the European partnership country who has the energy resources. We will speak about some later, but we are ready to share and to distribute with our neighbors also to help them and to achieve the global security challenges in our region. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
a
you.
lot, Mr. Chair. Dear colleagues, really it's an important issue which we are discussing, and it's very good that we have open exchange of views, and I would like to thank, first of all, our host, Maria, for organizing such kind of discussion. I would like to thank also experts, both Armenian and Azerbaijan experts who spoke very clearly what are the challenges and what are the possibilities really to have much more stable peace in the region, which is really very much needed, both for the region, for European continent and things like that. So definitely, it's absolutely clear that still our discussions very much are influenced by, developments in the past, which are painful for both sides. It took, 30 years of those differences and tragedies and fights, military fights. Yeah, that's very painful history. But of course, also we need to look into the future, and future which is challenging. There are turbulences around, very huge turbulences. All of us we watched yesterday, and in the first part of our discussion we discussed what is happening, with Kremlin aggression against Ukraine. But also there are opportunities which are opening, and I am very glad that during last Eastern Partnership Summit, President of the Council, Charles Michel, took an initiative, to invite leaders, both leaders of Armenia and Azerbaijan, to have, how to say, informal, discussion. As I understood from Charles Michel advisor, that took 5 hours, of conversation, and that was positive, with some kind of maybe no written, agreements, but at least, better understanding in between of two leaders. And that is why I see really, that EU can play that role, assisting two countries and regional, countries, other countries, to go for something what we can call normalization. Normalization of relationship, normalization of the views, both on the past and on the future. And of course, such, issues like delimitation and demarcation are very important. It's not easy. We went through, in our countries back in 90s, but I would tell you, we do not have our Latvian colleagues, but for example, our border in the sea, in the Baltic Sea, still is not decided because, we have some different opinions. Well, we are not fighting, for delimitation of the border, but nevertheless, sometimes it's not so easy, we understand that. So I would wish really, all the best for both countries to find a solution on that important issue. Sometimes, some kind of small disagreements can stop, moving forward. So that's our experience, what I said with Latvia, but, I hope that you will do better than us, We can share experience, how to overcome, some kind of those problems. Of course, interconnectivity, it's very important. And that is where, again, I would wish all the best for both of you, to find a way, how interconnectivity with the neighboring countries, for example, with Turkey should be opened, how to have interconnectivity inside of both countries, to go from one part of the country to another part of the country. Again, we have some experience, for example, perhaps that we have long time existing agreement, in between of EU and Russia and Lithuania to have transit through Lithuanian territory to Kaliningrad district, and that is established in such a way from, technological or technical point of view that, we do not have any problems. I even, it became such a normal, thing that I don't even, if you will ask me all the details, I will not be able to explain because, it goes very smoothly. So, but that is again experience which you can look for, Of course, human rights, human rights for minority people, for ethnic minority people are very important, and that is what, again, we had some issues back in Lithuania. We have, strong Polish minority, and consolidated in one part of Lithuania, in the history it was quite an emotional issue. Back, in between of the First and Second World Wars, So then we had emotions after 1990s. Of course, there was no any kind of military, developments. But slowly, those things also, became resolved with really protection of human rights, and that is what can be done. And again, EU is able to, to assist in all those, practical steps, both, by investment, by investment especially into interconnectivity, also by supporting, your wishes, for more accelerated, like Armenia has SEPA agreement, for more accelerated integration, at least towards, European markets, and so on and so on. You have, some things which you can be very proud. I am really quite astonished by Armenian achievements recently in the fight against corruption. In Transparency International ratings, you are, I would say, champions. You are almost, you are coming closer and closer to Lithuania. We need to, to speed up ourselves, and that is what you can, you can show your achievements to even to European institutions, which are looking how to assist other Eastern Partnership countries which are not so successful in fight against corruption. So your experience would be of a very, very great, great, it could be, used for other countries. And I would say also that looking into the future, we need to look, very much deeper, and that is what I am very happy that we shall have some discussion, into, longer-term perspective, how our economies, and especially, we have Azerbaijan, and, how our economies will go through Green Deal implementation. Now, this is one of the major topics now in EU. It means that, consumption of gas and oil in 15, in 20 years' time will go down. There are countries, if to read, some global literature, there are countries, for example, in Middle East, in Arab, world, which are preparing themselves for that transition, for that change. How to move from economy which is based on gas and oil, and on gas and oil exports to some kind of, another branches of economy. So those will be really quite challenging, times, and that is where we can, have good possibility to look forward, how to assist each other, with our knowledge, with our expertise, and with our developments. But all of those developments, of course, first of all, they require peace and stability in the region. So I would wish all of us, to have more of that in order really to create success of our countries.
Ja, vielen Dank für die Worte. Dann,
thank you very much indeed. And the floor now goes to Mr. Kalyurin. Ms. Kalyurin, I beg your pardon.
Yes, and I would like to make a couple of remarks in my capacity as the member of the Euronest, but also as the chair of the South Caucasus delegation. I already recognized Armenia for hospitality, but I would like to thank the Azerbaijani delegation for being here today, for participating in this discussion, and needless to say, I would also like to thank all the experts and everybody who has spoken so far. Just a couple of remarks. I would like to make it very clear that the European Parliament has not recognized the final solution by the war. We have made it very clear that war is never a solution, which means that if we talk about long-standing, sustainable peace, it has to be negotiated under the auspices of the OSCE Minsk Group. This was also reiterated in the resolution that we passed in the European Parliament last week when we were discussing common security and foreign policy. So I want it to be very clear, war is never a solution. I would also like to recognize the points that were made, I would say, by both sides on the need for pragmatic steps, being it delimitation, deblocking, marking of the border. These are exactly the small steps that are needed to build confidence, to build trust, and to build respect that is missing today. If I may, I would also like to urge both sides to refrain from polarizing and insulting rhetoric. It doesn't help. It doesn't help not on the level of the members of the parliament, not on the level of the leaders of the countries. It just doesn't help. And as the members of the European Parliament, we are here to assist. We can't solve the problems because these are your countries. These are your questions. You have to solve them yourselves. But we are here to assist if you see any way where and how we can assist you. So I have proposed it also to my Armenian and Azerbaijani colleagues. I'm happy to bring together the parliaments under the auspices of the South Caucasus delegation or whatever other auspices you find it suitable. So once again, we're here to support you. We're here to be with you, but these are your questions, and you have to find solutions yourself. Thank you.
Okay, dann machen wir noch eine Wortmeldung.
Thank you. Then we'll take one more request for the floor, and afterwards I'd like to try to conclude. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I'm Arman Yagoyan, co-chair of Armenia European Union Parliamentary Partnership Committee from Armenian side. Thank you, Ms. Kalurand, for your remarks. But nonetheless, I would like to respond to some remarks of Azerbaijani delegates. So about peace and about conflict. I don't remember how many times our Azerbaijani colleagues repeated, trying to convince themselves, I guess, that conflict is not over. I'm afraid that conflicts are not over by stating that they're over. Conflicts are over when the causes that brought to the conflict are eliminated. This is how conflicts are being over. So the causes that brought to Nagorno-Karabakh conflict are not eliminated. They are even exacerbated, I would say, because the hatred in Azerbaijan towards Armenians and Armenian culture and everything related to Armenians is getting worse and worse and worse. The very recent proof of this is the creating of a committee that is meant to eliminate Armenian inscriptions on churches which allegedly have been inscribed there in place of some Albanian inscriptions. I don't even know how this works in the minds of our Azerbaijani delegates or this committee, but this is what is going to happen. And I would like to inform our European colleagues about this. I guess the same destiny that happened to Armenian cross-stones in Nakhichevan, about 10,000 cross-stones starting from 8th century up to the 19th, 20th century cross-stones. They were just crashed down and thrown to river back in 2003 and 2004. You talked about Caucasian Hiroshima or something like that. Look at ethnographic map. You talked about multiculturalism. Baku is an ethnographic Hiroshima. Where are the 200,000 Armenians that live there? According to the Soviet census, about 500,000 Armenians lived in Azerbaijan. Where are they now, apart from Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians? In Baku, in Sumgait, sorry for saying this. Where are these Armenians? Where have they disappeared? Azerbaijan is that multicultural state. Where are they? Sorry. I don't know, you're trying to convince yourself or you're trying to convince other people around. And as a conclusion, I would like to say that peace at any cost is not possible. Peace at the European continent has seen peace is at any cost, and they appear to be the most devastating wars in human history. Peace should be constructed by work, by mutual respect, respect of others' right of human rights, right of life, right of property. Is the right of life and property of Armenians guaranteed in Azerbaijan? I guess no, because you cannot find any Armenian who lives under the Azerbaijani authorities' rule, anywhere, be that in Baku, be that in other cities. They all disappeared. So I would suggest to think about this and to take this into consideration when trying to solve issues, when trying to suggest solutions, to take these nuances into consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Then you have the floor one more time.
Be quick. I'm not going to embark any discussion around this, what was mentioned by our colleagues. Just would like to mention that multicultural values and the status of Azerbaijan as a multicultural country is recognized by international community. Over 52 minorities are living in Azerbaijan, Russians, Jewish, and many, many other minorities. And I would like to mention, underline that there are around 30,000 Armenians living in Azerbaijan. And a number of my friends are Armenians, who we live together and they're living still in Azerbaijan. But there is no one Azeri living in Armenia. And this is a fact. And when we talk about this cultural heritage, and I don't want to provide you with the statistics that among the 67 mosques in Karabakh, 64 are not destroyed. They are just putting zero on the ground. So these are the facts. And we are not going to make any change in the multicultural heritage. We used to call UNESCO over 30 years to come and to make the assessment and monitoring, to evaluate the situation of the cultural heritage, of Azeri cultural heritage in the territories, which didn't happen. And now we are waiting for the international community to make the independent assessment and to bring the realities to the international community. And we don't want the war. We have never wanted the war. That's why over 30 years we were waiting for this resolution of the problem in a peaceful way. But we have always based on the United Nations resolutions which indicated clearly international recognition of the borders of Azerbaijan. And now we are calling for the peace, prosperity, for the friendship, which we have witnessed over the years between the countries in our region. And I'm sure that this peace will come to the region. And I would very much like to call my colleagues from Armenia to avoid any insulting words and address to Azerbaijan, because we are feeling ourselves as a guest, and I appreciated my colleagues from Armenia for warm hospitality, and I'm sure that this is a good step forward in bringing the warm relation between two nations. Thank you very much.
Okay, vielen Dank.
Thank you. I see that we have one more request from the floor. Ms. Bocharisvili asked for the floor, and afterwards I would really like to close the debate.
Yeah,
sorry, sir, not madam, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just want to make very, very brief comment. First of all, I would like to reiterate that peace and stability are key in the region, and Georgia is committed to contribute to efforts to bring sustainable peace in our region, which is essential for future development and prosperity. As 3+3 format was mentioned, I would like very briefly to clarify the position that Georgia has regarding this format. As Georgia does not participate in these negotiations, we think that it would be more correct to refer it as 3+2 initiative. From the very outset, Georgia was very clear about its position not to be part of this initiative, considering the objective realities, while Russia continues occupation of Georgian territories, while Russia is taking actual steps towards annexation, kidnappings and human rights violations are happening on Georgian territories, it is impossible for Georgia to join this format. We believe the Russian Federation aims to use this alternative to limit Western engagement in the region and efforts that Georgia is fundamentally opposed to. So that is briefly that I wanted to clarify when it comes 3+3 format. Thank you.
Ja, vielen Dank.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to thank everyone who contributed to this lively and very interesting debate. If I may, I'd like to contribute some thoughts of my own, which came to mind listening to all of you. And I have to say, listening to everyone speak, I was thinking of the victims of these conflicts, the people who died, their families, their children, the widows and the orphans. And the people representing Armenia and Azerbaijan must help these victims, and they can only do so by promoting long-term peace in the South Caucasus region, because the people living there have earned that peace. And I hope that this meeting here today will be a further contribution to peace and freedom in the South Caucasus. And this brings me to the next point on our agenda for today, the state of governance in the Eastern Partner countries. Point 6 on our agenda, as you know. I was just asked to point out to you that the experts should not speak for longer than 5 minutes on coming points, because otherwise we won't be able to conclude on time. And the next point is a bit of a lengthy one, the state of governments in the Eastern Partner countries. Dear colleagues, the next agenda point has to do with the state of governments in the Eastern Partner countries. Unfortunately, the EP co-rapporteur on the governance report in the countries of the Eastern Partnership, Mr. Peter Pollack, cannot be with us today. He has kindly asked me to present the working document of the report on his behalf. As to the procedural aspect, please note that this text is a working document. A working document means that the draft report will only be submitted after our meeting in Yerevan, in this case, in order to allow the co-rapporteurs to take into account the comments raised by the members and the experts during these meetings here today. The draft report will then be open to amendments, of course, and it will be put to the vote at the plenary session of the Euronest Assembly, which is due to take place in Chisinau in April. Before I say a few sentences on the report, I would like to welcome the co-rapporteur, Ms. Maria Karapetyan. And on behalf of Mr. Pollack, let me thank her for the excellent cooperation. We will be hearing from her as well. And I will now be giving you what Mr. Pollack wrote down with respect to his report. It is a report with a very long name, which is about good governance based on political dialogue and political cooperation by improving efficiency and administrative cooperation. It has to do with responsible governments, and it has to do with the important reforms which we need in order to build fair and stable and wealthy societies. In the report, it is set out that the governance, of course, in every Eastern neighborhood country is different. The report should be recognizing the EU programs more, as well as the introduction of electronic communication systems in Armenia and Azerbaijan and Moldavia, as well as anti-corruption systems which have been improved in these countries. However, it is emphasized that it's necessary to have closer cooperation and contacts A peaceful and stable atmosphere is an important precondition in order to carry out these efforts. However, the report also says that the COVID-19 pandemic has been an additional challenge for the reform process. However, major improvements should be achieved as soon as possible, especially in carrying out the reforms in public administration and in the justice sector, as well as in the fight against corruption and organized crime, and the strengthening of transparency and democratic liability. The transparency of democratic processes should be strengthened as well. Further investments in digitalization of public administration are also urgently necessary. The EU member states will continue to give their support, especially in connection with the various agreements and initiatives which have been decided on. The Eastern neighborhood countries should dedicate themselves even more to further reforms in future. And now I would like to give the floor to the co-rapporteur, Ms. Karapetian, and then we will be hearing from our experts. Ms. Maria Karapetian.
Thank you, Mr. Göking. I will be very brief, colleagues, since we are short on time. Just pointing out two things. One, the structure of the report. It basically encourages all to take a careful note of how institutions within a country should collaborate and have a dialogue on good governance, democracy, and anti-corruption, how these formal institutions should keep that dialogue and cooperation alive also with the non-state actors, including the civil society, and how all these actors then should keep the dialogue and cooperation going with external actors, the international community, and all of the oversight mechanisms that are around our countries. From Armenia's perspective, I also want to point out to three levels that are important, in my opinion, on good governance. One is obviously the institutions, the legislation and the formal state structures. The second level is the capacity of these institutions, the human resources that we constantly need to work on to improve. And above all of this, as an umbrella, is the political will of the governments and the parliaments, because no matter how strong of institutions we have and how strong of capacity is invested in these institutions, it always comes to also the political will that we as leaders need to demonstrate for these reforms to take place and for them to be permanent and resistant to potential fluctuations of this political will in the future. Thank you very much.
Ja, vielen Dank, Frau Karapetian.
Thank you very much, Ms. Karapetian. And now I'll give the floor to our experts for 5 minutes each at most. We would be very grateful to have your comments on the working document, but of course you're also free to give us your own opinion on the entire issue as a whole, but please stick to the speaking time allotted to you. So Ms. Sonia Ayvaltsan is our first speaker. She is in charge of the Anti-Corruption Center here in Yerevan. Ms. Ayvaltsan is connecting with us online. You have the floor, madam.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks for this opportunity to speak at this high-level meeting. I represent Transparency International Anti-Corruption Center, which is the national chapter of Transparency International, and we have been on the ground for already 20 years, and for 20 years we have been working with the government, advocating the government for anti-corruption report and good governance report generally. So our mission is to promote good governance through reducing corruption and strengthening democracy. We are doing research, monitoring, capacity building, legal review, and promoting the anti-corruption policy, which we view as a large policy, and not only specifically anti-corruption institutions and anti-corruption architecture, work on the integrity of public administration, public assets management, quality of public services, political and civic participation. I would like to focus on a few aspects of the working document, which I felt are kind of missing. Probably they are minded between the lines, but they were not explicit. And I would like to draw your attention on this for focusing either on the document or generally while reviewing further implementation. The one important thing is the emphasis on public trust in the institutions, which is very crucial for ensuring effectiveness of any type of reform. Indeed, the public trust starts with the free and fair elections and the quality and effectiveness of the provided services and implemented policies. But to a large extent, it also depends on the level of engagement of the public and with the public during the decision-making process. And this was not much visible from the document. Civil society and expert community have to participate in the development of the reform agendas and policies and get due feedback and have constant communication and thoughtful communication with the institutions, also in between the partners. The second thing is the good governance implies acknowledgement of the concept of the service to people and development of a sense of responsibility of public officials before the citizens. This implies certain behavioral patterns, certain institutions and procedures, and there should be developed the responsiveness to there should be development of responsiveness to people's needs and demands, openness to criticism, integrity, and ethics. The third thing that I want to emphasize is that the good governance needs professionalism and responsibility on the side of public institutions, indeed, but it cannot take place or cannot be sustainable and enduring without due demand from the society. Hence, it is important to stress the role of the good governance education, including the anti-corruption education, in order to cultivate an environment where good governance will be the most demanded manner of governance. And there will be intolerance toward dilettantism and corruption. And the fourth and last thing that I want to emphasize is the important issue for governance is the course of action indeed taken, which can be measured and judged on the basis of achievement of goals. Hence, the major issue is the goal setting and strategizing, which is oftentimes missing in our institutions. So mere discrete actions to serve individual good governance principles or carried out by individual institutions or carried out by individual officials. So they might not be productive and will not create a holistic system, holistic approach towards good governance. So which will put in question the whole concept and effectiveness of the policy. So these are things that need to be included in the interstate, in-state policies, as well as regarded in the international communication, and there will be much appreciated the exchange of experiences and the exchange of methodologies in that regard in future. Thanks.
Ja, vielen Dank. Dann erteile ich jetzt als nächstes
Thank you. Then I'll now give the floor to Ms. Marocchi. She is in charge of the EAP Index and will be giving us her view from the point of view of the EAP Index. You are with us online as well, madam, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for giving me the floor. I had a short PowerPoint presentation showing graphs from the EAP Index. I was assured that I could present it, but I see that screen sharing is disabled, so I cannot show it. Maybe if this can be sorted, in the meantime, I will start speaking anyways, since I'm mindful of the time that is allocated. As today we are discussing governance in the EAP, I will give you a brief overview of the recommendations that are stemming from the last edition of the EAP index on this area. For those of you who don't know it yet, the EAP index is a monitoring tool that the EAP CSF has been producing for several years. It charts the performance of the 6 countries and their progress and in some cases regress towards sustainable democratic development and also European integration. It has overall 18 indicators, so it's very broad analysis, the one that we carried out. But given today's topic, of course, I will only give an overview of the main takeaways in the specific areas of judiciary, anti-corruption, and public administration. Now, on to the results. I thought of starting with public administration, where we have some relatively good assessment from the index. All EAP countries have progressed since the last edition, although we do see a significant gap between the associated trio and the other EAP countries. Despite this relatively positive assessment in terms of trend, we do continue to observe some key problems. Among others is, first of all, the lack of proper public consultation with public and CSOs. This was, of course, made worse by the COVID-19 pandemic, but it is a problem that existed prior to the pandemic and that continued to be observed. And similarly, we recorded also serious deficiencies when it comes to consultation with local government and with local authorities. A second problem that we observed and that emerged across all countries is the lack of staff that is qualified, motivated, and adequately paid, but also hired on a merit basis. Mrs. Karapetyan pointed to this problem earlier, which obviously hampers the effectiveness of public administration. In Georgia and Ukraine particularly, we noted numerous reports of nepotism, but also levels of pay remaining low across the region, and this being an issue especially in Armenia and in Azerbaijan. Looking ahead, we do have some recommendations that would start with, first of all, defining rigorous standards and principles for consultations with local authorities and CSOs. We think that the EU should support the definition of unified standards for public consultation processes, especially between central government and local authorities, given the problems that we have observed. Secondly, it should be a priority to revisit the legislation on employment and remuneration in the public sector and addressing issues of staff retention, professionalization, but also adapting salary levels to make sure that talents aren't lost to either abroad or private sector. We also think it would be really important to establish practical trainings on public ethics on a permanent basis. Here we think also that the EU should make the EU for Integrity program more visible and ideally consult future activities with broad groups of stakeholders, including representatives from all levels of government, so central, local, and regional, but also civil society organizations. I see I cannot yet share my screen, so okay, I will not see the graphs, but I will put in the chat a link in case people want to explore the index results by themselves later on. So moving on to the fight against corruption, which is also a subject today. Here, unsurprisingly, we have a way more negative assessment. When it comes to corruption, all EAP countries except Armenia saw some very significant backsliding. And out of the associated trio, we saw that Ukraine experienced the sharpest fall of all of them. In this area, we identified 3 main challenges. First of all, the gap between law and implementation, which remains a challenge throughout. We see that there are a number of in place in most EAP countries, with the notable exception of Azerbaijan, which warrants a good part of the scoring, which, well, you cannot see at the moment. So we have laws on conflict of interest, declaration of assets, illicit enrichment, confiscation of assets in corruption cases, and more. However, in practice, these laws are seldomly applied, either because of entrenched interest and political influences, or because of lack of resources. And on the lack of resources, an example is the tackling of the storing of assets via third persons. We saw here that countries have detailed legislation for this, especially Moldova, but then in practice, it's very difficult to implement this legislation because of lack of resources. A second challenge is also caused by the inconsistency that exists between some national anti-corruption that there are overlapping mandates among the various bodies charged with tackling anti-corruption, and this, of course, doesn't...
Sorry, there's a problem with the sound, Mr. Chairman. I'm very sorry. And besides, we can't run over time, otherwise we won't be able to finish our agenda. Therefore, I would now give the floor to Dr. Kerry Longhurst, who is joining us from Warsaw online as well. You have the floor.
And I'm going to try and reinforce a few comments that Tanya made just then, but I'll try and be brief. I think first and foremost, as Tanya noticed, we have this development in terms of trade. We have sectoral support developing quite well between Eastern Partnership countries and the European Union, but without this strong underpinning to do with the rule of law, to do with state accountability, to do with strong democracy, all of those advances in sectoral cooperation and trade are going to remain quite precarious. I think a second key observation that I would make is that the goal of gender parity or gender equality is not very high on the Eastern Partnership Eastern Partnership kind of formula, and it's also not very high on the agenda points of Eastern Partnership governments, or I'd say parliaments as well, which I think has to be looked at. Of course, women's security, women's economic independence, women's rights have been set back many years by the pandemic on a global level, but I think this is particularly acute in the Eastern Partnership countries because by and large, the kind of robust laws and the enforcement mechanisms for assuring gender equality are rather weak. So the consequence of the pandemic, I think, is a lot higher in the Eastern Partnership region. Another thing that the Eastern Partnership Index found was that the role played by Parliament in scrutinising and formulating relations with the European Union was surprisingly limited, and we found that there was potential for much more activity from the side of parliaments to scrutinise, amend, to have informed debates about all things to do with the European Union. And I'll talk about some remedies that we might make to address these problems, if I'm okay with time. First and foremost, in terms of what the priorities and the remedies might be, of course, we need to see a redoubling of efforts towards sorting out the rule of law and state accountability. And I think what the index really showed was the need to focus upon transparency, as was already mentioned, the need to focus upon independent judiciaries, and the need to tackle, obviously, corruption as well. And in all of those steps, in the very kind of fabric of sorting out those problems, civil society groups have to be woven into the fabric and not just kind of contributing on a certain level, but in the design, in the implementation, and in the monitoring and verification of independence in these really important areas. We also, I think the index also showed a need to re-engage or recapture the relationship between authorities and civil society groups in that broader context of post-COVID recovery or living with COVID, as we're told how it has to be. The important thing here is not to slip into old ways of a very dysfunctional relationship between between CSOs and authorities. But to make sure at the very least that civil society organisations are involved in verifying and deciding on where post-recovery funds are actually used to best effect. On the issue of parliaments, I mentioned that we found that the role of parliaments are quite limited in Eastern Partnership implementation. In terms of remedies, what could this be? Well, we saw that there's a need for parliaments to have heightened and better capacity in the form of a higher level of expertise and advice to help parliamentarians and parliamentary committees in particular to have informed debates and to check and amend programs of governments. But linked to that, we also found that parliamentary committees...
Thank you very much. I'm afraid I'll have to interrupt you. We only have a limited amount of time. Many thanks for your contribution. And the floor now goes immediately to Mr. Radoslav Dardi, who is the Deputy Director of the Department Eastern Partnership, Regional Cooperation and the OSCE. Mr. Darsky, you have the floor. You're with us online as well.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I will try to be brief. First of all, thank you very much for organizing this meeting. It comes very timely, taking into account two issues. First of all, the challenging context in which... I'm sorry, I had some background noise. The challenging context in which we are operating. Second of all, in the context of recently convened Eastern Partnership Summit back in December last year. And maybe literally 2 words on the outcomes of the summit, since this is important for the debate we are having today. The summit was clearly a success, and it introduced a new agenda which confirmed the support of the EU for the Eastern partners. And this new agenda put particular emphasis on 3 components: recovery, resilience, and reforms, and also introduces a new priority areas, one of which is accountable institutions, the rule of law and security, which of course is very important for us, and which of course confirms that the rule of law, good governance will be the cornerstone of the future Eastern Partnership agenda. Speaking about the situation in the Eastern neighborhood, of course, we are well aware of the challenges. I think we all heard today what are these challenges. Let me mention some of them. Obviously, we see a need for strengthening the rule of law and the more judicial reforms. We see a need for building more efficient, transparent, and accountable public administration. We see the need to operationalize anti-fraud and anti-corruption frameworks and combating organized and economic crime, and aligning the justice sector with the EU standards. Of course, this is why particularly the summit put an emphasis on the rule of law and the good governance, and we are happy to see that the report you presented to a large extent concurs with our assessment, and I'm happy to say that to a large extent the priorities you enumerated or the proposals you enumerated in the report already now constitute to a large extent the future agenda of the Eastern Partnership, where once again we put a huge emphasis on the values as a cornerstone, and also we underline the indispensable role of the civil society. I did not mention the fact that we have 2 pillars now, the pillars of governance and investment. Those 2 pillars are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. Maybe very shortly, very quickly about concrete actions we would like to undertake in the future agenda, and I'm sure that Nick, who is going to speak after me, he will go more into details. Let me mention concretely what we intend to do. First of all, we would like to align partner countries' justice systems and legislative frameworks with the European standards. We intend to establish a Eastern Partnership Academy for Public Administration, develop strategic, legal, and institutional frameworks exactly to prevent and combat fraud and corruption, and fostering cooperation with EU agencies like Eurojust or Europol. Literally 2 words on the future agenda and the new architecture. This is very important because it shows that how we intend to translate all these aspects into reality. We intend to create a new Eastern Partnership panel on democracy, human rights, and fundamental freedoms, which will discuss protection and promotion of human rights as a whole. And also we intend to create specific working groups, for example, on gender equality or media literacy, which also is very important. And finally, I should and I have to underline the element of conditionality, since it has been emphasized by many stakeholders during the summit. The conditionality will be there, and more for more principle will be there for the future, which essentially means that the more the partners, and we heard here the call for more political will, and this is precisely about that, the more our partners are eager to implement reforms and to pursue the reformative agenda, the more the EU will be happy to support these endeavors with concrete means. So to summarize, we understand the situation is very complicated and challenges, but we offer very concrete means, very concrete agenda, very concrete steps to be undertaken to change the situation. And we hope that we will be able to use it in an efficient way to propose concrete solutions and in the end to deliver and provide benefits for the people in the region. Thank you very much.
Ja, danke.
Thank you, Mr. Darsky. And I will now give the floor to the Commission, DG NEAR, who is represented by Mr. Nikolaos Sendovic, Deputy Head of Unit, Georgia, Moldova, Economic Investment Planning. He's with us in the room.
Chair, dear colleagues, the advantage of coming at the end of this session is that quite a lot of what I was going to say has already been said. I don't think I need to reiterate the challenges in the region, which we talked about: fight against corruption, justice reform. I'd like to stress a little bit the challenge of gender inequality, and one of the previous speakers mentioned that the pandemic has been actually extremely negative for gender equality. And I don't need to talk either, as my colleague Richard just mentioned, about what we're doing and the framework, the two-pillar approach in the Eastern Partnership. What I can talk about is some of the concrete actions that the Commission will be taking and the programs under this second governance pillar. We will strengthen, our aim is to strengthen the resilience of the partnership to security threats, work towards more diverse and inclusive societies, and with an active civil society and independent media. Civil society organizations are a key pillar of democratic systems and an important partner in the reform process. I would add that engaging with civil societies for us represents quite simply good policy making. Now, we are not starting from scratch in all the work that we do in this area. The EU has significantly strengthened our financial and technical assistance to the Eastern Partnership in recent years, and we have an array of different instruments and programs, both at regional and bilateral level. And let me, if you may allow me, mention 4 of these. We have a partnership with the Council of Europe called the Partnership for Good Governance, and this provides tailor-made support to Eastern Partnership countries to bring national legislation and policies closer to European standards in the field of human rights, rule of law, and democracy. We're in the second phase of this partnership and working on establishing independent anti-corruption bodies, moving judicial reforms forward, and combating discrimination. A second program, and this was already mentioned, is the EU for Integrity program, and this is in cooperation between the EU, the OECD Anti-Corruption Network, and the Open Government Partnership, with which we will support Eastern Partnership countries in their efforts in the areas of anti-corruption, civic engagement, and open government reforms. A third program is called EU for Gender Equality, and through this program, we're supporting government's reform work towards equal opportunities for women and men. There's a lot of awareness raising with messages of gender equality and engaging men, particularly in active fatherhood and caregiving and violence prevention. And it's through this program that we aim to mainstream gender equality into everything that the EU does in the region. And fourthly, let me mention the EU for Independent Media program, which aims at providing immediate long-term financial viability for independent media outlets in the Eastern Partnership countries. We have a number of programs to support independent media also in each of the countries, and we have allocated over 20 million euros in action grants under the European Endowment for Democracy. So these are just some of the examples of the many EU programs to promote good governance and gender equality in the region. As Mr. Darsky just mentioned, a lot of what we're doing is operating under the more for more principle, so countries which do engage in such reforms can benefit from further assistance. And finally, I would like to stress, I think Mr. Cholios mentioned this, about the fact that this is a partnership based on values, and this is very much the spirit in which we're taking forward a number of these programs to strengthen questions of governance and rule of law in the region. Thank you very much.
Yeah, vielen
Many thanks. Then we'll now move on to the debate, and I would like all of the members who would like to contribute to please be brief and to remember that we don't have much time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. I will try to be as brief as possible. First of all, welcome to Armenia, and I hope that besides these working hours, you will enjoy your time in Armenia. We are talking about reforms, we are talking about state institutions, and of course, reforms are crucial for any country, and we're keen to implement, for example, you mentioned declaration system of incomes or health security system or public administration reform, but there is one thing that I would like to mention. Two of our experts, they were sure that pandemic had a negative effect on our reforms. But there is another side of the medal. Because of pandemic, we saw all the problems in state institutions that were hidden. And these problems were connected with the capacities of state institutions, with the functionality, with digitalization, and everything that we were talking about, just in beautiful words. Now we saw that they are very necessary, and it is very urgent to solve all these problems and to implement all these reforms. And as for the corruption, we are talking about fight against corruption, but it is more important to speak about the reasons of the corruption and the motivation. And I'm also sure that the basic factor in the fight against corruption is political will, and I can assure that we have that will in Armenia. We have done already much in this direction, and we'll go on with our reforms and with the fight against corruption with your help, dear colleagues. So once again, welcome to Armenia, and thank you for your visit.
Vielen Dank.
Many thanks. Would anyone else like to speak? Yes, please.
Bitte.
Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will try to be very quick. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank rapporteurs for the presentation of the report on governance and commend the well-prepared document describing recommendations on new pillars of the Eastern Partnership agenda, new instruments Eastern Partnership countries should benefit to address underlying concerns impeding to comply with the main principles of the good democratic governance. 12 paragraphs of the report highlights all the tools and engagements for the reforms improving governance, as well as Eastern Partnership countries' achievements in this direction. I would like to reflect on paragraph 5 and inform you about the successful implementation of the National Action Plan on Promotion of the Open Government for 2020-2022, approved by the decree of the President of the Republic of Azerbaijan. This 13-page action plan covers jointly developed commitments in areas such as fighting corruption, increasing transparency, simplification of grant and NGO registration, simplification of legislation on fighting money laundering, improving state services, increasing efficiency of public councils composed of civil society organizations, holding regular meetings with CSOs, and etc. A public-private partnership called Azerbaijan Service and Assessment Network, ASAN, which provides 140 services by 11 public organizations, 180 services by 30 private organizations, and which was awarded by United Nations Public Service Forum, is one of the best tools for the implementation of the National Action Plan. ASAN serves the citizens through 8 characteristics of good governance, namely rule of law, equitability and inclusiveness, participation, consumer orientation, accountability, responsiveness, transparency, effectiveness, and efficiency. It employs 2,000 use and processes 31,000 daily applications through the single window approach. The other reform in the social service management system is an establishment in 2018 those agencies that provide state social services in timely, transparent, modern, and innovative manner. Having briefed you about these reforms that directly affect improvement in the governance in public administration, I'm applying to you and call for the slight addition in paragraph number 5 by complementing progress made by Eastern Partnership countries. We propose to add to paragraph number 5 the following sentence: Euronest Parliament Assembly welcomes successful continuation of the 2020-2022 National Action Plan on promotion of open government in Azerbaijan, which had been elaborated in close cooperation with civil society organizations. Thank you very much.
Vielen Dank. Gibt's sonst noch?
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to speak? Yes, please. Well, if that is not the case, then I will conclude our debate, and I'd like to express my gratitude, which is heartfelt, for the very good debate we had here today. My gratitude goes to our hosts as well. Armenia is an excellent host. This is really an excellently organized event. Thank you very much for your hospitality. We appreciate it greatly. And thank you to everyone who was involved in preparing this meeting, including the Secretariat. And we now move on to page 2.7 on the agenda, the challenges and opportunities of the European Green Deal for the Eastern Partner countries. And I will now be replaced by Mr. Mirkishvili, to whom I would like to give the chair and the floor, obviously.
Thank you very much. So our next point of the agenda is focused on the topic of the upcoming reports of the Committee of Energy Security. I recall actually the title of the report will be Energy Security Challenges and Resilience within the Eastern Partnership in the context of the European Green Deal and clean energy transitions. The co-reporters, Ms. Maya Bitatse from Georgia and Mr. Bronis Rope from the European Parliament, have prepared the working document, which you have all received ahead of the meetings. We will first hear a brief presentation from the co-reporters and short contributions from our invited guests, after which we will open the floor to all members for their comments and questions. Please note that the working document contains a preliminary draft, but the rapporteurs will only submit their final draft after this meeting, so that they can actually take into account the information and comments received by you. As a brief word of introduction, let me just underline that the European Green Deal will have a significant impact beyond the EU borders, and especially the EU neighborhood. Legislation such as the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism will affect all our countries. So we all have a shared interest in finding the best ways to adapt, just as we all share the common goals that all our countries signed up in the Paris Agreement. And we are well aware that the faster progress in clean energy transition will bring significant benefits in terms of greater energy independence as key issue in the Eastern Partnership regions. Both co-rapporteurs have sent their apologies as they were not able to travel to Yerevan, but their colleagues will step in to deliver their remarks. First, Mr. Hatia Tsilosani replacing Ms. Bitatse, who was in the lead in preparation of these documents. So Ms. Tsilosani, you have the floor to present the main lines of Ms. Bitatse's work. Please.
Thank you very much. It's indeed a pleasure to be here today with you and to present the key points that was identified in the working document. As it was mentioned, you can submit your comments, remarks, and we will be happy to incorporate in the final version of the document. So we all know that pollution and climate change has happy and glad that EU has set this ambitious goal to achieve climate neutrality by 2050, leading the global action in this regard. So with the European Green Deal, the EU is establishing the model for how to upgrade the quality of infrastructure, products and standards in a climate neutral way and to give the world the example. So since the launch of the European Green Deal, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound effect of the EU and Eastern Partnership country economies, and we believe that European Green Deal has the potential to play a key role in ensuring sustainable economic recovery on top of its primary objectives of addressing long-term climate change threats. So the document also welcomes the fact that all the EIP countries have adopted the strategic environmental assessment and environmental impact assessment legislation, and associated countries have started the implementation of corresponding EU directives. On top of this, some of the countries, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine, are also contracting parties for the Energy Community Treaty, and Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Moldova have started elaborating and adopting their national climate change adaptation strategies. The document also welcomes the establishment of a regional network on renewable energy, and this is led by Lietuva and Georgia. Document also welcomes the work of EU for Energy and EU for Climate initiatives that is supported by different financial instruments from the European Neighbourhood Investment Platform. Despite the progress achieved so far, of course, all the EIP countries are facing challenges to achieve their ambitious plans towards greening their economies. So the document emphasizes the importance of climate change, energy security and resilience in Eastern Partnership countries in the context of the European Green Deal and the overview of the current state of play, which are achievements and challenges in the Eastern Partnership countries in the energy sector. So in order to enhance energy security and resilience, as well as they implement ambitious strategies for reducing dependency on the fossil fuels, the document underlines several key factors such as gradual approximation of national legal framework with the EU legislation, diversifying energy supplies, promoting cost-effective sources of energy and fostering domestic and foreign investments in renewable energy sources, fostering energy pricing reforms, improving connectivity and promoting evidence-based energy policy. Those are main directions that is covered by the document, and of course each of them are explained in a detailed way in the document, and as I said, we very much welcome any ideas, remarks or any comments from your side, and we will definitely work on the incorporation of the relevant comments in this document. So in this, I thank you very much, and if there will be some questions to go in more details, I'll be happy to address.
Thank you very much, Ms. Salani. Dear colleagues, I want just to make a little changes in our line because one of our guests have a very limited time. In spite of the second co-reporters, I want to give the floor to Mr. Lorkovsky. He should be online. But now I would just be grateful to the observational topic, Mr. Lorkovsky. You don't need to comment on the next prepared by our reporters, but are more than welcome to do so should be you wish. Mr. Artur Larkovsky, Director of the Energy Community Secretariat, who is connected now online. I recall that Ukraine, Georgia, and Moldova are members of the energy community, while Armenia is an observer. The energy community has an important role in the transportation and approximation of legislation and has a lot to say to the subject of our today's discussion. Mr. Larkovsky, the floor is yours.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Honorable members of the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to address you today to bring the perspective of the energy community to this exchange of views. The draft report just presented by the co-rapporteur offers an excellent overview of the challenges the Eastern Partnership countries are facing in the context of the green transition. I'd like to underline that the energy community I'm representing today offers solutions to face these challenges. The solutions which have been invented by the European Union and carefully adapted to the specific circumstances of the neighboring countries of the EU. As you know, and as it has been mentioned, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine are fully fledged members of the to provide the regulatory stability and transparency needed to increase investor certainty and boost renewable energy and energy efficiency investments. For its members, the Energy Community Treaty is a key instrument to advance the green agenda. The adoption of the Clean Energy Package last November is testament to this. The package includes legislation covering energy efficiency, renewables, electricity market design, and security of supply rules, but it is the governance regulation that I would like to draw your attention to. The regulation sets common rules for planning, reporting, and monitoring of energy and climate policies and targets. In particular, countries will be required to submit national energy and climate plans, focusing on the period up to 2030. The aim of the plans is to draw up an integrated policy framework to steer decarbonization efforts until 2030 and beyond, aligning with the ambition of the European Green Deal. The November Council also adopted a decarbonization roadmap, a political document outlining the sequence of adoption, transposition, and implementation of decarbonization focus rules. The roadmap puts the energy community members on a path towards setting and achieving 2030 targets in line with the mid-century decarbonization objectives. The new legislative acts and the decarbonization roadmap together will help energy community to gradually transition away from fossil fuels, start introducing carbon pricing. Furthermore, the package put forward measures to protect vulnerable consumers, tackle energy poverty, and empower consumers to actively participate in the energy transition. Tackling energy poverty is particularly important, not least due to the recent spikes in gas, coal, and electricity prices. Seeing the need to intensify our efforts, the Energy Community Secretariat recently created a new center for alleviating energy poverty. The Energy Committee has achieved the 2020 targets for energy efficiency, and renewable technologies are setting to make a breakthrough as well. Yet there is no doubt that there is more potential to be tapped. The Energy Committee is currently in the process of setting ambitious 2030 targets for the increase of renewable energy, increased energy efficiency, and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. Another key element of the successful energy transition is an open, competitive, and integrated energy market with strong connectivity between countries. This is another key objective of the Energy Community Treaty, which strives to ensure that the same EU energy market rules and principles apply in neighboring countries. Ladies and gentlemen, as rightly recognized by the draft report presented today, delivering on the external dimension of the European Green Deal is absolutely critical to its overall success. I believe that the energy community is an efficient provider of solutions in order to strengthen the legal and regulatory framework in the European Union neighborhood needed to pursue ambitious energy, climate, and environmental policies and achieve the energy transition. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Larkovsky. Now I give the floor to Ms. Marketa Grigorova, who will speak on behalf of Ms. Rob to deliver his remarks. This is the second reporter. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and dear colleagues. As was stated, I am replacing my colleague Bronis Rope, the co-rapporteur of this report, who unfortunately could not be here. This report is a little bit longer, but I would make just a few points in terms of what we think are the most important issues. But also, firstly, I would like to thank the Georgian co-rapporteur, Maya Bitadze, for her excellent work, and Mrs. Tsilosani for her representation and remarks here. I would like to highlight three main points. First, we need to improve energy security, resilience by concentrating on connectivity, energy efficiency, and clean energy transition. A big part of this is the development and financing of electricity interconnections, as well as smart grids, in order to ensure the necessary infrastructure to set and implement binding climate and energy targets for the 2030, 2040, and 2050 horizons. We also need to work on monitoring, technical capacity, investment and instruments for the implementation of policies and regulations for renewables and energy efficiency. Only then can we use energy savings, energy efficiency, and renewable energy sources in order to reach the targets of the Paris Agreement. During this process and within the context of the green recovery of our economies, modernizations of existing energy infrastructure will be key, as well as using the great potential for developing renewable energy sources and striving for a true green energy transition. The second point is that we need to increase energy security while decreasing import dependencies and the EAP countries. We should therefore work on developing an open, competitive and integrated energy market in Eastern Europe, which could then lead to more opportunities for trade, investment, capacity building and joint projects in the field of renewables, smart grids and energy efficiency. In general, all countries must increase infrastructure cooperation in the region, also with a view to diversifying energy supplies and to improve the connectivity of EAP countries' energy sectors, while ensuring environmental sustainability. And last but not least, the third point, further cooperation and increased support from the EU side will be crucial, while all of our countries must stick to their current commitments or be even more ambitious. The EU should consider cooperation and participation of eligible and willing EAP countries in the Energy Union. The EU and EAP countries must find ways to further engagement in the fight against climate change, including participation in the European Green Deal. And most importantly, we must insist on the implementation of commitments under the acquis that has been built up for relations between Eastern European partners and the EU, including the Energy Community Treaty. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Maketa, for nice introduction. Now, Mr. Nicholas Sendrovics, Deputy Head of Unit for Georgia, Moldova and Economic Investment Plan, will speak on behalf of the DG NEAR of the European Commission. Mr. Sendrovics is with us in the room. The floor is yours now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If you don't mind, I'd like to cover both this point and the next one, because the Green New Deal and energy security are very linked. As you yourself said earlier on, the European Green Deal does have consequences for the countries neighbouring the EU. This is a whole new way of doing things, covering not only energy and energy security, but climate, environment, and the broader green transition of our economies. This presents a number of challenges and opportunities. In the EU, we present the European Green Deal as Europe's growth strategy. But we cannot do this alone. And for this reason, the Commission is committed to working with our Eastern partners to reshape policies, business models, infrastructure and societies to make the green transition a reality also for our partner countries. Now, I'd like to talk about two aspects of the Green Deal which are relevant for the European partnership. One is the question of, let's say, governance, the legal framework in which energy and climate policies take place, and the other is the investment which the EU is going to offer and help for the region. As the colleague from the energy community mentioned, the governance pillar and the framework in which energy reforms take place is absolutely crucial for taking energy reforms forward. That these solid legal, regulatory and policy frameworks are necessary to enable reform and encourage investment. And we are helping with this process. We're providing broad support to strengthen energy security, the governance of energy markets through a program called EU for Energy. And this covers market integration, unbundling, which is always a sensitive subject, particularly in the gas sector, energy governance, and the integration of renewables. And as I said, this is going to be absolutely essential for attracting investment and benefiting consumers. Now, if I go in a little bit more detail on renewable energy and energy efficiency, renewable energy, and we've heard this already, provides a source of clean and cost-efficient energy, and the EU has already financed pilot projects on, for instance, biomass and photovoltaic energy generation. But large-scale investments will need to go hand in hand with upgrades to the transmission and distribution network, and they will also require a well-regulated energy market. Given the great potential for energy savings in the region, we are working on an energy efficiency first principle. Energy efficiency in buildings is a triple social, climate and economic win for all of the EAP countries. This requires renovation work to reduce cities' climate footprint, but this is also a sector which can create jobs and support SMEs and investments. Finally, on the issue of, let's say, governance and reforms, the EU is providing broad assistance to our countries to fulfill their commitments under the Paris Agreement through our EU for Climate program, helping our partners implement and update their national determined contributions and their low emission strategies. This is also where we're preparing for the carbon border adjustment mechanism, and we're aware that this is something which is seen as with considerable concern in our partner countries, but we need to prepare our partner countries for the entry into force of the CBAM. If I turn more to what we're doing in terms of investment, we've already mentioned that the European partnership going forward has two pillars, a reform agenda and an investment agenda. And the centerpiece of our post-2020 agenda for the Eastern Partnership is an economic and investment plan with this investment pillar. We will be reaching our goals by leveraging public and private investments and using a number of new instruments such as guarantee schemes under the European Fund for Sustainable Development, as well as grants and blending, and leveraging much more investment from the private sector. Now, to support an energy efficient, energy resilient and interconnected region, we hope to mobilize investments of up to 3.4 billion euros. Our focus is going to be particularly to scale up energy efficiency measures in buildings. And just as a reminder, buildings account for 40% of energy consumption in this region. We have a high-level energy efficiency initiative. This involves the EU and several international financial institutions, looking at large-scale renovation initiatives. We've started in Georgia and the Ukraine, and we want to build upon existing initiatives using, for instance, our Green for Growth Fund, Covenant of Mayors, and the Eastern Europe Energy Efficiency and Environment Partnership. The EU also wants to work together with our partners to identify and support priority energy interconnections to enhance countries' energy security, green their energy mix, and ensure affordability. All of this under the framework of energy security, which is acutely relevant right now. As with our support to governance, all sectors of the Economic and Investment Plan will work together to advance the green transition. We also want to invest in greening SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprises, as well as municipalities, improve water supply, sanitation, forestry, and waste management, as well as digital infrastructure to ensure a just transition. So I'll stop here, if I may, Mr. Chair, where the EU is ready to support our Eastern partners through a number of different instruments. But I would say perhaps the key line from all of this is our willingness to scale up our investments, particularly in energy efficiency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Actually, you mentioned very important aspects of the Green Deal. I fully agree with you. The transition to the Green Deal is very important in our agenda, but we shouldn't forget about the challenges in front of us, because non-smooth transition on non-reliable actual delivering is causing the prices what's happening in the European Union for gas, you see. That's why we should be very careful. This is our games, all actually, but we have to be very careful and to plan everything. Thank you very much for introduction. Now, finally, for the DG Energy of the European Commission, Mr. Matteo Governatore, Policy Officer for Neighborhood Policies and International Relations. Mr. Governatore should be connected online.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the Euronest Parliamentary Assembly, thank you very much for inviting me to take the floor at this event. The EU is legally committed to become climate neutral by 2050. And to get there, we strive to reduce greenhouse gases by 55% by 2030. And the European Green Deal is our political and economic instrument to achieve this ambitious goal. It also boosts the necessary decarbonization of our energy systems. And the publications in 2021 of the Commission's Fit for 55 package and additional initiatives on the gas market, the energy performance of buildings, the reduction of methane emissions linked to the oil, gas, coal supply chain, mark an important step towards the implementation of the Green Deal. Now, almost 75% of all emissions in the EU stem from the production and use of energy. And this is not so much different in most of the other regions worldwide. However, the EU holds responsible only for around 8% of the greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. And this means that obviously we need to act globally as an actor. The transition to clean energy systems can be considered a revolution, and it is of utmost importance to have the people on board. At the time when we are taking action to tackle the clean energy transition, many world regions, including ours, as you, Mr. Chairman, just pointed out, face a sharp rise in energy prices since last year. If the affordability or the security of energy supply comes into conflict with the clean energy transition, there is a risk that environmental and climate change concerns will take a backseat, or that energy supply and the volatility of oil and gas prices are used as a pretext or as a political instruments during the transition years. In response to this, in October, the EU presented a toolbox which sets out short-term measures that member states can take immediately to counter energy price rises. Almost all member states made already use of these measures, and we are currently preparing additional measures. The measures will contribute to an affordable, just, and sustainable energy transition for Europe,
and greater energy independence. The gas crisis recently faced, for instance, by Moldova, illustrates once more that the security of supply remains a critical issue for every economy. We have seen once again that a full dependence on a single source of supply is risky to the energy independence of a country. Investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency will not only reduce the dependence on imported fossil fuels, but they will also provide more affordable energy prices that are in turn more resilient to global supply constraints. The clean energy transition is the best insurance against price shocks in the future and needs to be accelerated. The EU is also currently preparing a new European strategy on international energy engagement, which we will present in spring. It aims to respond to the global geopolitical changes and leads on climate change and sustainable economic recovery at the same time. Close cooperation with our neighborhood in the energy field is a must if we want to jointly achieve climate neutrality in Europe by 2050, and this will also be well reflected. And joint business development opportunities, our eastern neighbors have been and will remain major partners in the energy transition. We will use all available tools, including the new economic and investment plan for the Eastern Partnership, to continue our work with you, with the external energy infrastructure development, including cross-border connectivity, energy legislative and regulatory frameworks, and the efficient and transparent functioning of energy markets, renewable energy, and energy efficiency over the whole energy value chain. For Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia, energy market and infrastructure integration are the main priorities and should be achieved through measures taken in the framework of the Energy Community Treaty. This is a crucial step to enable the change to renewable production, the decarbonization of energy supply in those countries. Market coupling also allows using the most efficient and thus least polluting power plants in a region at a given point in time. For example, optimizing the use of hydropower, solar, and wind to replace coal whenever possible. Another main focus for the whole region will be cooperation on energy efficiency, which has been mentioned repeatedly by previous speakers, notably in buildings and in industry, as the region's economies have all a very high energy intensity. Also, the work on renewable energy and its system integration will be reinforced. And regional cooperation on renewable hydrogen is also envisaged. The EU security of supply is clearly intertwined with the security and political social stability of its immediate neighbors, and this is particularly true for core regions and supplies of natural gas. Therefore, the Commission's approach to those risks consists of complementing market openness and competition with just transition initiatives, environmental mitigation measures such as elimination of methane emissions. The economic and investment plan for the Eastern neighborhood, with which I would like to basically conclude my short intervention, will help the region's long-term economic recovery and foster sustainable growth in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic and advancing the connectivity and clean transition agenda. One of its 8 focal areas is indeed sustainable energy. The new architecture of cooperation under the Eastern Partnership is fully in line with the European Green Deal and brings the synergies between energy, climate change, and environment-related aspects into the forefront. With that, I will conclude my remarks and over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Matteo, for interesting introduction. Now I open the floor for all members who would like to make any comments. If you wish, you may also ask questions, or to our invited guests and co-reporters, they will have an opportunity at the end to react to your questions. Now I give the floor to Ms. from Armenia, please.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank all of you colleagues for constructive dialogue and very interesting discussions. Further on, I would like to update you on Armenia's recent endeavors, plans and activities in the framework of the EU Green Deal. So despite the overwhelming challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic and 2020 armed conflict, the government of Armenia remained focused on and showed even more ambition on its climate and environmental agenda. Over the spring and summer of 2021, the government of Armenia adopted the new and updated nationally determined contributions, the National Adaptation Plan, and the government decree on Interagency Climate Council effectively streamlining and elevating climate-related decision-making to the office of the Deputy Prime Minister. In this context, the government of Armenia considers the prospect for the EU-Armenia cooperation within the European Union Green Deal a unique opportunity to make country's vision towards green transition and climate resilience a reality. Our vision for building back better rests on the principles of green, resilient, and low-carbon growth, which entails scalability of adaptation and bankability of mitigation efforts, ranging from reforestation at scale to investments in renewable energy and energy efficiency. By 2030, Armenia's target is to reach 15% of solar energy share in total energy production, and the share of zero-emission power generation in the total will reach 54%. This is more than compliant with the EU Green Deal principles, which serve as a crucial guidance and ambition scale in Armenia's path towards green recovery and sustainable development. Development of the partnership with the European Union is a key priority for Armenian foreign policy. Since the independence of the Republic of Armenia, cooperation with the EU has greatly contributed to carrying out reforms in the fields of economy, justice, public administration, developing and strengthening democratic principles, civil society, and consolidating institutions dealing with the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms. On this basis, a comprehensive and enhanced partnership agreement was signed on 24th of November in 2017. In the framework of the 5th Eastern Partnership Summit, the CEPA envisages cooperation in a wide variety of sectors, including environment, energy, and climate change. The process of legislative approximation with the EU has started more than 10 years ago and has received new impetus through the initiation and signature of CEPA. A rigorous partnership agenda is formulated, the implementation of which was and is one of the top priorities for the government of Armenia. Noteworthy is the fact that one of the most voluminous and detailed sections within the EU-Armenia CEPA agreement is the climate and environment-related scope. Armenia's environmental, energy, food and water security largely correlates with the mitigation and adaptation framework that it lays out in its nationally determined contributions and national adaptation plan. It is hence the government's priority interest to engage most effectively with the EU, a partner who historically and currently has been most prominent supporter of Armenia and its climate and environmental agenda. The government of Armenia welcomes the EU's new initiative on large-scale aid and investments as part of the EU's new economic and investment plan for Eastern Partnership countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, floor is Mr. Kubilus. Floor is yours, please.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. I think that it's really a crucially important topic which we are discussing. And I would touch maybe both topics, security and Green Deal. And I would really look into my colleagues from European Parliament and also, of course, Eastern Partnership countries, representatives, that we need to be very concrete and very precise. What we faced, at least, on European continent during recent season, we have seen that really Gazprom is anymore not a reliable supplier of gas. That is what we need to see in a very clear way. What is the reason why they behaved in such a way? Why is that manipulation of the market, increase of gas prices and increase of electricity prices in Europe have happened? Well, knowing and seeing more, from geopolitical point of view, what Kremlin is doing, we can understand that this is part of their strategy, weaponizing gas supplies. And, targeting, well, my conclusion was that besides, targeting major capitals, Germany or whatever, trying to influence, their decisions, also Gazprom and Kremlin started the war against implementation of Green Deal, because Green Deal implementation for Russian economy is quite a big challenge. Still, they are not preparing themselves, and that will continue. So here I see challenges for us, because in some Eastern Partnership countries, energy security is really very easy challenge. And we need to start to speak very concretely. In 2024, I see big problems for our colleagues from Ukraine, when really the transit through pipelines, which are coming from Russia to Slovakia and to Poland through Ukraine can be stopped. And contract will be over, and I don't see that Kremlin will be ready now to renew that contract, even despite the fact what will happen with Nord Stream 2. That is where EU needs to be very precise and concrete. Now is a time when EU needs to invest, not big money, but invest into upgrade of, interconnectivities in between of Slovakia and Ukraine, and in between of Poland and Ukraine, which would allow Ukraine to get, reverse flows of gas from Europe. That would also, very, very clearly, with ease situation of Moldova, which we see how it's challenged by dependency on Gazprom. I don't know, I know that Armenia is also very heavily dependent on Gazprom, supplies. For time being, maybe those are stable, but we need to be ready, what can happen. So again, I am looking to EU, experts, to EU authorities, that they should bring some kind of, assistance with very concrete plans, with very concrete projects, and very concrete money to be invested as soon as possible. Because really, again, I am saying weaponization of gas supplies from Gazprom, from Kremlin side, is becoming a problem. Now, second, on really very important developments, very important policy which EU is pushing forward, Green Deal. Again, I see very concrete issues and challenges for Eastern Partnership countries, which we need to try to find solution from both sides. One thing is really to cut emissions and to transform your economies, which is very important. But second thing, EU is introducing also so-called CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, very complicated terminology, which will mean that if your production will not be at the level of demands from EU side on Green Deal, on cutting emissions, then you can be taxed on the border with heavy taxes. And I'm not so sure that there is proper mechanism in those directives which we are discussing now in the European Parliament, which would allow Eastern Partnership countries at least to have some kind of transitional period to adapt themselves to this new challenges. Introduction of ETS system, of emission trading system, is also one of the solutions, but this is also not so easy to be done. And the last point, of course, I think that you should look also that Green Deal is opening, opportunities for new industries, new developments, especially with clean hydrogen, which can be, knowing how, for example, many sunny days you have in Armenia or in south of Ukraine, that could be really new big possibilities, which I would, again, I would say, let's look into those possibilities. And of course, Azerbaijan, I see challenges which you will face, because with cuts in carbon economies, you will need to transform yourself. But that's much better than we know. So, but all the success in that really big challenges.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kubilius. Now, floor give Armenia delegation, please. Maybe Sultan Mameda, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Since I commend the report, and the report tackles two issues: energy security challenges and clean energy transition, and I would like to share with you some of my observation. and in fact propose to include in the report our support to the successful outcome of the full-scale first operational year of the Southern Gas Corridor and its contribution to the provision of reliable, competitive and affordable energy supplies from Republic of Azerbaijan to markets in Georgia, Turkey and Europe. This transmission system spanning across 6 countries contributes to a diversification of energy supplies and sources, including to regions that previously lacked access to natural gas, where it can also support an accelerated coal phase-out. The government of the Republic of Azerbaijan continues to play a strategic role as a key enabler of the Southern Gas Corridor, and it continues its efforts to deliver secure, stable, and affordable energy supplies to Europe. The recent global surge in gas prices has once again highlighted the need for the diversification of supplies. During the 1 year, last year and January of this year, through this transmission corridor, around 19 billion cubic meters gas was supplied to Europe and Turkey and Georgia. And this is sustainable, ongoing project signed, agreed with the countries. Green energy can emerge as an important and promising track in EU-Azerbaijan cooperation in the field of energy. There is a huge potential for the EU to contribute to the green agenda of Azerbaijan in the liberated territories, which fully match with the objectives of the EU's Green Deal and decarbonization strategy. Azerbaijan has proposed to EU to establish a new format of dialogue covering green transition, environment and climate change issues. Azerbaijan targets to increase the share of renewable energies in the total energy capacity from today's 17% to 30%. Azerbaijan also committed to reduce greenhouse gas emission by 35% by 2030. The international assessment of the potential of renewable sources in Karabakh and Eastern Zangezur and preliminary figures are very promising. It's about 7,200 megawatt potential in wind energy and more than 2,000 megawatt potential in solar energy. We have special programs on assessment of the Caspian Sea renewable energy potential. Based on the initial figures, the technical potential of the Caspian Sea is more than 150,000 megawatts. Law adopted this year on rational use of energy resources and energy efficiency as a requirement of modern development will allow efficiency to have positive impact on various sectors of the economy and households, including the energy sector. Based on international experience, we have started to draft normative legal acts arising from this law that will come into force on July 1st of this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mamadov. Now I give the floor to Representative of Armenia. Sorry, I don't see your surname. That's why I see Representative of Armenia. Khachaturian, please.
Well, my second name is Khachaturian. Energy has been a major geopolitical factor since oil and gas were used to lit and heat houses, run factories and cars. Insecurity stemming from dwindling of conventional resources puts energy security next to national defense for the survival and well-being of nations. Countries have developed a variety of strategies for securing their energy supply, reducing dependence on fossil fuels, and promoting alternative, sustainable sources of energy. However, it will take time before the world goes green. Until this blessed time comes, the world, and particularly the EU and EAP states, shall ensure that energy exporting and/or transiting countries do not abuse their dominating position and do not allow them to force the importing countries to incite them to take or to refrain from taking certain actions. Unfortunately, in this part of the world, we witness exactly the situation I described above. In fall of 2020, in gross violation of international law, Azerbaijan attacked Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. Azerbaijan, a large producer and transit hub of fossil fuel, was not condemned for this act of aggression, for thousands of deaths, for tens of thousands of refugees, tortured prisoners, and for torpedoing the peace process. The civilized world was silent. Gas and oil from Azerbaijan are too dear. In Armenia, this silence raises a fundamental question. Is a world where oil is valued higher than the life of a child is really civilized? Ladies and gentlemen, for the peace to be long-lasting and sustainable, it shall be based on justice. Justice comes first and then comes peace. Refraining from threat or use of force will be a fundamental principle to guide the solution of any problem in these and other regions. Of course, we understand and we respect all principles promulgated in the final act in Helsinki back in 1975. I understand that many parties, countries, and people and politicians try to contradict the principles of territorial integrity and national self-determination. So I call everyone to consult the advisory opinion of International Court of Justice on unilateral declaration of independence of Kosovo. I think they had all the I's dotted and all the T's crossed. Ladies and gentlemen, we understand that for long-lasting peace, first of all, the parties involved in a conflict shall obey certain behavior, certain rules. But we also understand that international community also has its role. And we hope that international community will continue playing a very important and constructive role in this region to guarantee fair solution of Artsakh problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just one intervention as I'm chair. I don't know which republic you are talking about, but I know that none in European Union, none in Eastern Partnership countries, there is not such republic like Nagorno-Karabakh. I don't know, where is it? If you mean the Karabakh Economic Zone, so we are not going to make it independent in the future also. Thank you. Who is the next one to have a floor? Nobody? Okay, then I want to conclude the debates. I want to give the floor to our co-rapporteurs. The first, Ms. Solani, if you want to add some things.
Thank you. No, just to once again underline the importance for the EIP countries to join the European Green Deal. We once again need to have in-depth analysis what should be done in order to fully meet the commitments that will be taken from our countries, and also we need institutional and financial readiness in order to really understand how to mitigate the negative impacts of the climate changes and how to incorporate internal policies and make it in line and effective to the international commitments and Paris agreements. So European Green Deal, as I said, is an instrumental in meeting the challenges of the climate change, and as it was mentioned by our colleagues from different countries, this is crucially important to have one understanding how we can really be responsible and responsive to those changes that is coming in the future from the global changes. So thank you once again, and looking forward to further cooperation with our partners.
Thank you very much, Ms. Solani. Now the floor is Ms. Grigorova. It's yours, please.
Thank you very much. As I am just representing Mr. Brune, Boris Rope, I will not be discussing it in much further detail. I will just say on his behalf that I'm very happy to hear so much interest in this very crucial topic for our future, and I do hope that there will be a lot of future cooperation from the EU and EAP countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, finally, I want just to add some remarks that actually it was mentioned by, you can speak at the next debate, please. We are concluding now. We have the next debate, yes, energy security. I just want to add that as Nicholas and Ms. Kubilus mentioned it, just for information, maybe its figure will be interesting for you. Now, Azerbaijan is exporting approximately 10 billion cubic meter gas to the European Union. Especially we export the gas to Georgia, we export gas to Turkey, to Bulgaria, to Greece, Albania, and Italy. During the last meeting as the Source Gas Coordinator in Baku as agreement with the European Union, you mentioned very truly that we are ready to increase the volume of the gas to export to the European Union, approximately 30 billion cubic meter. It's 3 times more than we are now exporting. But for that once, we have to find the investments. Because we need for that to increase the volume of the pipeline, there should be the back reverse interconnection pipeline at the Balkans actually. So it means that if we find any investments, that who will be investing in these pipelines, and the guarantee from European Union for the purchasing the gas resource of Azerbaijan is ready actually to increase the volume of that ones. But I want to remark and to underline that clean energy not being taught to collect the renewable energy, and the source of the renewable energy is not actually stable. What's happening here, you see at the north of the Europe, and what's happening in the climate changes, that we think that we have to both track actually renewable energy and the clean energy also. I want to thank to everybody, all of the members, who's the rapporteurs and the guests also. Now I give the floor to Mr. Siolos, who will be charging the following point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I will introduce the last item on the agenda of today on behalf of my colleague Ramona Strugariu, who is the co-chair of Energy Committee. In fact, this item is strongly connected and embedded with the previous item. And here just a short remark. In the previous item, we discussed about the challenges and opportunities of European Green Deal, referring specifically to the energy sector. I just want to underline that Green Deal will affect and we can create also opportunities for other sectors, transport, industry, agriculture, environment, and I think it could be useful in some meetings in the future in Euronest to discuss also about these opportunities on, I don't know, agriculture or transport sectors in relation with European neighborhood and Eastern Partnership. So coming back to the last item, energy security challenges for Eastern Partnership countries in the current geopolitical context. It is more than obvious now that Russia uses energy supply as a hybrid weapon, not only in relation with the European partnership countries, but also with some European member states, and it's the case of my country, Romania, but also other EU member states. Gazprom is in fact a tool in Russian political leadership hands, use it very directly, and Mr. Kubilius mentioned that we have to find solutions and alternatives in order to avoid these kind of situations in the future. As long as this blackmailing is not stopped by some practical measures to ensure gas and energy supply for European Union and also for European partnership countries, European Union will be perceived as being weak. And from geopolitical point of view, I think we have to take this into account. A real partnership with Russia and capacity of negotiation with Russia will be effective only when European Union will be able to put on the table some alternatives to gas supply from Russia, and transition to Green Deal can be an opportunity on the medium term, on the long term, but on the short term, we have to find solutions also and alternatives to avoid this kind of situation when Russia blackmailing European Union and our partners on it. Now, I would like to open the discussion on this subject. and to give the floor to our colleagues from European Commission to explain us how they intend and with what kind of proposal they intend to come in order to find alternatives on the short term and solutions on the short term to this situation, and also how to use the opportunity of the Green Deal and transition to the decarbonization in order to propose solutions also for this situation. So I will give the floor to Mr. Matteo Governatori to come back with some specification in this direction. So Mr. Governatori, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair. I will, if you don't mind, I will focus at least the first part of my remarks on Ukraine. I would say for obvious reasons, even given the latest development. Let me first underline that the European Commission is doing its utmost to support Ukraine in this current phase. And indeed, as you certainly know, we launched an emergency macro-financial assistance of 1.2 billion euro, which has been approved recently by the European Parliament. We are also swiftly processing a 120 million euro state and resilience building contract for Ukraine, a budget support operation which will contribute to the crisis preparedness and crisis management capacities in Ukraine. And furthermore, we will continue to invest in Ukraine's future thanks to our economic investment plan, which aims to leverage up to 6.5 billion euros in public and private investments. Let me recall that we are in talks with our Ukrainian partners to negotiate the conditionalities for this assistance I just mentioned. And there are discussions on aiming to condition these funds also on a plan for energy security of Ukraine for the next winter, for the next heating season, the one of 22-23, including sufficient purchase of gas and sufficient replenishment of gas storages ahead of the next season, also to cater to possible, worst case scenario of disruption in the gas transit, Russia gas transit via Ukraine, which has been mentioned earlier by some of the speakers. Energy security clearly continues to be a critically important issue in our relations with Ukraine. This has been underlined by our president also during the EU-Ukraine summit, which was held last October. And we also agreed in that forum on the importance of the full integration of Ukraine's energy network and markets into the EU. That's also something which contributes positively to security based on a level playing field. We remain committed to working together against any potential efforts by third parties EU-Ukraine strategic energy partnership, which provides a platform for discussing, among other things, also energy security, but also green transition in Ukraine. In that respect, let me recall a recent development, quite important one, which was also mentioned in the statement of the EU-Ukraine summit. We have set up under the partnership which I just mentioned, a high-level working group between EU and Ukraine on electricity and gas market integration. This has been launched on 27 October last year, and it will be instrumental in accelerating electricity and gas market reforms in Ukraine, and also contributing to finalize a very important project, the synchronization of Ukraine's electricity network with the continental European network. And by the way, the first island mode test for the Ukraine power grid is now scheduled to be carried out actually later this week, if everything continues and is implemented as currently planned. And by the way, in 2019, the reforms in the gas sector played an essential role in integrating Ukraine with the EU gas market and for reaching the agreement on gas transit with Russia, which was mentioned earlier. And we should ensure that we have an equally strong reform process also in the electricity sector to also pave the way for a successful synchronization. We welcome the continued collaboration with Ukraine on the Green Deal dialogue, which is key to assisting Ukraine in its green transition. The Green Deal dialogue has been basically created a bit more than 1 year ago. It held already 2 meetings last year. The EU side appreciates Ukraine's ambition to approximate its policies and legislation with the European Green Deal. We remain committed to supporting Ukraine in these efforts, which are also, like I hinted at before, an integral part of strengthening energy security and decreasing energy dependence. Ukraine also submitted to the EU a proposal to create a regional energy security partnership, building on our regional energy security partnership also in view of the concerns about energy security also linked to Russia's behavior. Now this partnership builds on our long-standing cooperation to address security of supply risks. Many of its elements are already being covered in ongoing or planned work streams between the EU and Ukraine, including one element which has been mentioned by Mr. Kubilius earlier, the facilitation of physical gas reverse flows from Hungary and Slovakia to Ukraine. So our general approach there is that we should aim at making full use and fine-tune existing work streams rather than creating new structures. I will add just a couple of remarks since this was mentioned earlier, like I said, on these reverse gas flows between West and East, between Slovakia and Hungary and Ukraine. Let me recall that the Commission and DG Energy in particular has already been active on that front, because via meeting with both Slovakian and Ukrainian authorities, but also the gas operators, and supporting direct talks between them. The Slovakian is also supporting talks between them. And thanks to those initiatives, the transmission system operator of Slovakia used to the gas transmission of the physical reverse capacity to Ukraine to 42 million cubic meters per day already for this winter, and this has been announced publicly. Although further negotiations will be needed to prolong this arrangement also to the next heating season. And as of the beginning of this year, there is also another channel of physical gas reverse capacity has been activated from Hungary to Ukraine, and we know that there are talks to make it not just temporary but also permanent. We are also in close contact with Ukraine as regards their immediate security of supply concerns. And overall, we know that the situation for this winter appears to be under control, thanks to, among other things, this reverse capacity which has been activated, which I described earlier, and which starts now being used by Ukraine in order to import in the west to east direction gas to Ukraine. It seems also that Ukraine has already contracted out also additional LNG cargos from Poland and can also rely on its gas storage, which is currently in its storage system. This being said, it has to be recalled that so far the gas transit via the Russian gas transit via Ukraine, which was sharply decreased in January, has now got back to levels which are closer to the contractual arrangements. So it has not been actually disrupted so far. I would stop there since I don't want to exceed my allocated time. So over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Of course, we mentioned a lot today Ukraine because it's on the top of the agenda, and it's also an important partner in this process of interconnection on gas supply. But not forget Republic of Moldova also, as you probably know. In the last 2 months, Moldovan government was obliged to declare twice state of emergency because of the same reason, possibility or difficulties to supply with gas from Russia and Gazprom using the gas as gas supply as a weapon against Moldova. So this interconnectivity process is very important, and here the Commission have to play an important role, not only ensuring financial resources, and of course the European Parliament will fully support this, but also ensuring to our partners from Eastern Partnership technical assistance in this interconnectivity process on all the eastern border. So now I will open the floor. If you have remarks or questions, even if as I mentioned, this item was touched also when we discussed the previous item, but please, if you have questions or remarks. So if there are no other questions, I think we can stop here. I would like to thank again to our colleagues from Armenia for organization. We have now a lunch break, or I will give the floor to the co-president, Andrus Kubilius. Please.
Yeah, just for bureau members, at 1 o'clock we are planning to have a very short meeting of bureau just to update our statement. So grab coffee or whatever, and please come back here. You know, we shall continue in this place at 1 o'clock. Okay.
Okay, so we'll stop here, lunch break, and we'll take again at 2 o'clock. Maria, please.
So the lunch break is on the 3rd floor from 12:45 to 1:45. So it has already started. I hope it's waiting for you. We did have quite a few technical problems this morning. I apologize for them. So we will recommence here at 1:45 with the bureau meeting at 1 o'clock as well in this room. Thank you.